I never thought one beach trip would destroy my entire marriage. But here I am, alone in a house that used to be ours. Zachary and I had been married for 4 years when he suddenly had a problem with my annual trip to Myrtle Beach with my college friends. He actually went through my phone while I was showering, then told me it was a deal breaker if I went on the trip with my best friend Austin. Who does that? Try to control where I go and who I hang out with? So I went anyway. Maybe posting that bikini pic with Austin's hand on my waist was pushing it. But I needed to show Zachary he couldn't clip my wings. I had no idea that pressing post would burn my whole life to the ground. I never thought posting a beach photo would destroy my entire marriage. But here I am, sitting alone in the house that used to be ours, still trying to process how everything fell apart so quickly. My name is Paisley, I'm 29, and until recently I thought I had a pretty normal life. Zachary and I had been married for 4 years. We weren't living some glamorous existence, but we were comfortable. We had our starter home that we were slowly fixing up, decent jobs, and a routine that worked for us. He did project management, which meant traveling sometimes, and I had an office job that paid the bills. Nothing fancy, but we made it work. I honestly thought we were solid. Sure, we had disagreements like any couple, but nothing major. We'd always managed to work through our issues before. That is, until Austin became this massive problem out of nowhere. Austin and I have been friends since sophomore year of college. We actually dated briefly before I met Zachary, but it wasn't serious, just a few weeks of hanging out that fizzled out naturally. I never felt the need to tell Zachary about that part. It wasn't relevant, and honestly, it would have just created drama for no reason. Austin's always been my go-to person when I need to vent or just hang out without overthinking everything. He gets me in a way that's hard to explain. We have this shorthand from years of friendship, inside jokes, and shared experiences. He's been there through all my major life events, including my wedding to Zachary. Looking back now, I can see how Zachary might have felt threatened, but at the time, I thought he was just being ridiculous. He'd been making these little comments about how close Austin and I were for months. Like when Austin would text me late, Zachary would do this dramatic sigh and ask, "What does Austin want now?" Or he'd make digs about how I light up when Austin calls. I'd roll my eyes and move on because it seemed so childish. Our friend group has this tradition of going to Myrtle Beach every summer. It started in college, and somehow we've managed to keep it going despite everyone getting older, getting married, and some having kids. It's the one thing I look forward to every year: 3 days of no responsibilities, just relaxation and fun with the people who have known me forever. This year's trip was already planned. We had the beach house rented, everyone had requested time off work, and I was excited to have a break from the daily grind. Then 2 weeks before we were set to leave, Zachary dropped a bomb. We were having dinner at home, nothing special, just a regular Tuesday night. I was telling him about the plans for the beach when he put down his fork and said, "I don't think you should go to Myrtle Beach this year." Just like that, out of nowhere, I laughed because I thought he was joking. When I realized he was serious, I was floored. "What do you mean I shouldn't go? We do this every year. You've never had a problem with it before." "Things are different now," he said, his expression uncomfortably serious. "I don't like the energy between you and Austin." "Energy? What energy?" I asked, feeling my defenses rise. "He's my friend, Zachary. He's been my friend for years." "It feels inappropriate," he insisted. "The way you two interact, the constant texting, the inside jokes I'm not part of, it makes me uncomfortable." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "We've been married for 4 years and I've never given you any reason not to trust me. Not once." The accusation of impropriety made my blood boil. This was coming out of left field, and it felt like an attack not just on me, but on a friendship that meant a lot to me. The argument escalated quickly. I reminded him that these were my oldest friends, people I'd known way longer than him. His response was to pull up my text with Austin on his phone. He'd gone through my phone while I was showering. There was nothing even bad in those messages, just some inside jokes and plans for the trip. But Zachary fixated on one message where Austin said he couldn't wait to see me in my new swimsuit. It was a completely innocent comment about a swimsuit I'd shown our whole group chat, but Zachary acted like it was some secret code. "This is not appropriate, Paisley," he said, his voice tight. "How would you feel if I was texting a female friend like this?" "I'd trust you," I shot back, "because that's what people in marriages do. They trust each other." That's when he dropped the ultimatum that would change everything. "If you go on this trip with him, it's a deal breaker for me." Those exact words, a deal breaker. 4 years of marriage, and he was ready to throw it all away because I wanted 3 days at the beach with friends I'd had forever. Be lying if I said I didn't consider staying home. For about 5 minutes, I thought about canceling, but the more I reflected on his ultimatum, the angrier I got. Who was he to test me like this? To make me choose? I've always been independent. It's one of the things he said he loved about me when we first met. Now suddenly it's a problem? You can't be serious, I said, hoping he would back down. You're really going to make me choose between my husband and a tradition I've had since before I met you. I'm not making you choose anything, he said, his voice frustratingly calm. I'm telling you that I'm uncomfortable with your relationship with Austin and I don't want you spending a weekend with him at the beach. What you do with that information is up to you. So if I go, what then? I challenged. You'll divorce me over a beach trip. He didn't answer directly, which scared me more than if he'd said yes. I'll know where I stand in your priorities, was all he said. That night, we slept with our backs to each other, the tension thick between us. The next morning wasn't any better. We moved around each other like ghosts, barely speaking. I kept waiting for him to apologize, to say he'd overreacted, but he didn't. If anything, he seemed more resolved. After 2 days of this Cold War, I made my decision. I wasn't going to let him control me. I'd never tolerated controlling behavior in any relationship, and I wasn't about to start now, especially in my marriage. If he couldn't trust me to spend a weekend with friends I'd had for years, that said more about him than about me. The morning I was set to leave, I packed my bags while Zachary watched silently from the doorway of our bedroom. "So you're really going," he said, not a question but a statement. "Yes," I replied, zipping my suitcase with more force than necessary. "I am. And when I get back, we can talk about your trust issues." "This isn't about trust," he said, his voice eerily calm. "This is about respect." "Respect goes both ways," I shot back. "And so does trust." He barely said goodbye when I left, just sat there on the couch staring at his phone, acting like I wasn't even there. It hurt, but I was too stubborn to show it. I figured he'd cool off while I was gone and realize how ridiculous he was being. I had no idea that a weekend trip would be the match that would burn my entire life to the ground. And the worst part? Deep down, some tiny voice was whispering that maybe, just maybe, I knew exactly what I was doing when I walked out that door. But I wasn't ready to hear that voice yet. The drive to Myrtle Beach should have been relaxing. 3 hours of open road, good music, and the promise of sand between my toes at the end of it. Instead, I kept checking my phone at every stoplight, waiting for a message from Zachary. Nothing, not a text, not a call. Nothing. I told myself I was glad, no drama to deal with, but honestly, it stung. 4 years together and he couldn't even send a drive-safe message. Whatever. I cranked up my playlist and pushed him out of my mind. When I pulled up to the beach house, Austin was already there on the porch, beer in hand, looking exactly like he had every summer since college. Tall, athletic, with that easy smile that made everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. "There she is," he called out, jogging down to my car. He gave me a big hug and whispered, "Proud of you for coming." Something about the way he said it made my stomach flutter. He helped carry my bags in, catching me up on who had already arrived and the plans for the weekend. The house was exactly like always, slightly run down but perfect. 6 bedrooms, oceanfront view, and a massive deck for late-night drinking sessions. Our friend Tiffany gave me a sideways look when I walked in. "So Zachary was cool with you coming?" she asked. I rolled my eyes and said he'd get over it. She didn't look convinced, and something in her expression made me uncomfortable. Like she was seeing something in the situation that I wasn't. That first night, we did our traditional bonfire on the beach. Everyone was there: Austin, Tiffany, Katie and her husband Mark, Jason, and a few others who'd been part of our circle since freshman year. Someone brought up Zachary's absence, and I found myself getting defensive. He doesn't own me, I said, maybe louder than necessary. We're not joined at the hip. Austin nodded along, adding, Paisley's always been independent. That's what makes her Paisley. I felt seen in a way Zachary hadn't made me feel in months. Like my independence wasn't something to be tamed but celebrated. The drinks flowed, and with each one I found myself sitting closer to Austin. Nothing inappropriate, just laughing at his jokes, letting my hand rest on his arm when he said something funny. Old habits from a simpler time. Around midnight, he suggested a quick swim. The others had already headed back to the house, but the water looked so inviting with the moonlight on it, so we went in, still in our clothes from dinner. The water was freezing but exhilarating. We splashed around like kids, and for those few minutes I forgot all about my problems at home. Back at the house, wrapped in a towel and buzzing from the night air and alcohol, I checked my phone again. Still nothing from Zachary. So I opened Facebook and posted a quote. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who try to clip your wings. I added a beach sunset photo and watched the likes roll in. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I told myself I was just having innocent fun with old friends. That Zachary was overreacting, and I was right to stand my ground. But there was that little voice again, warning me that I was playing with fire. I pushed it away and fell asleep, dreaming of the beach and freedom and Austin's arms around me in the ocean. I didn't want to admit, even to myself, that this weekend was quickly becoming something more than just a vacation with friends. It was becoming a test of my marriage, of my boundaries, and of loyalties I'd never had to choose between before, and I was failing that test spectacularly. I woke up the next morning with a slight headache and the taste of salt water still on my lips. For a moment I forgot about everything, the fight with Zachary, the ultimatum, even where I was. Then it all came flooding back as I heard Austin's laugh drifting up from the kitchen downstairs. The weather was perfect that day, clear blue skies, just enough breeze to keep the heat manageable, and the ocean gleaming in the morning sun. Everyone was in a good mood as we gathered for breakfast on the deck. Katie was making her famous pancakes, Mark was brewing coffee, and Austin was telling some ridiculous story that had everyone laughing. Sleep well? Austin asked as he passed me a cup of coffee, his fingers brushing against mine for a second longer than necessary. Like a rock, I lied. In truth, I'd tossed and turned, half expecting to wake up to a barrage of angry texts from Zachary. But my phone remained stubbornly silent. After breakfast, we all headed down to the beach. I wore my new bikini, the one Austin had commented on in those texts Zachary had found. It was more revealing than what I'd usually wear, but I felt bold, reckless even. If Zachary had a problem with Austin complimenting my swimsuit, then why not give him something to really worry about? The thought made me feel powerful and petty all at once. We set up our usual spot, a cluster of chairs and umbrellas just above the tide line. The day unfolded like countless beach days before it, swimming, laying out in the sun, beach volleyball, and plenty of cooler drinks. But something was different this time. I was hyper-aware of Austin's presence, how he'd splash me in the water, the way his eyes lingered when he thought I wasn't looking, how he'd find excuses to touch my arm or shoulder. And worse, I was encouraging it. Around midday, everyone was taking photos. Katie had a new camera she was trying out, snapping candids of everyone enjoying the beach. Austin suggested one of just us. Come here, he said, pulling me close. His arm went around my waist, his hand resting a bit lower than it should have. I should have shifted away, should have maintained some distance. Instead, I leaned into him, smiling broadly as Katie took the picture. Later, after too many margaritas at the beachside bar, Austin and I ended up alone on the deck of the beach house. The others had gone for a walk down the shore, but I'd claimed to be too tired from the sun. Austin had stayed behind to keep me company. We sat side by side, watching the sunset paint the sky in pink and gold. In that moment, with the alcohol warming my blood and the day's sun still tingling on my skin, it was easy to forget I was married. Easy to slip back into the patterns of a decade ago, when Austin and I had briefly been more than friends. You ever wonder what would have happened? Austin asked suddenly, his voice low. If we'd given us a real shot back in college, I should have changed the subject. Instead, I admitted, sometimes. He turned to look at me, his eyes intense. Me too. There was a moment of charged silence, and then he leaned in. I knew I should pull away, knew that even this conversation was crossing lines I shouldn't cross. But I didn't move. His lips brushed against mine, and for a second I kissed him back before reality crashed over me. I pulled away, my heart racing. Austin, I can't. Because of Zachary? He asked, not moving back. Yes, because of Zachary. We're having issues, but he's still my husband. Austin sighed. The husband who gave you an ultimatum about coming here, the one who's trying to control who you see and where you go. His words hit a nerve. It's not that simple, isn't it? You're here because you know he was wrong, because you know you deserve freedom. Freedom. The word echoed in my mind. Wasn't that what this was all about? My freedom to make my own choices, to keep my friendships, to be my own person even within a marriage? Come on, Austin said, standing and holding out his hand. Let's get another drink. One drink turned into three, and as the night wore on, our friend group gathered on the deck for stargazing and ghost stories, another beach trip tradition. I sat next to Austin, hyper-aware of every accidental touch, every shared laugh. The others started heading to bed around midnight, but Austin and I stayed up, moving to the living room with a bottle of wine. The conversation flowed easily from topic to topic until somehow we were talking about relationships and what makes them work. The problem with Zachary, Austin said, refilling my glass, is that he doesn't understand who you really are. He wants to reshape you into this perfect wife who doesn't have male friends and always puts his needs first. That's not entirely fair, I said, feeling a twinge of loyalty despite my anger. He's never tried to control me before this. Hasn't he? What about when he complained about you going out with Tiffany last New Year's? Or when he made that comment about your dress at Mark's wedding? I frowned, trying to recall these incidents through the haze of wine. Those were just comments. They were tests, Paisley. Testing how much control you'd let him have. And now he's escalated to full-on ultimatums. The wine, the late hour, and Austin's words all swirled together into a potent mix that made perfect, terrible sense. In that moment, it was easy to recast Zachary as the villain of our story, the controlling husband trying to isolate me from my friends. Austin moved closer, his hand finding mine. You deserve someone who celebrates your independence, not someone who tries to cage it. I knew what was happening. I knew I should go to my room alone. Instead, I let Austin lead me to his room, let him close the door behind us. What happened next was both inevitable and completely preventable. We didn't have sex. I had that line drawn firmly in my mind. But what we did do was definitely crossing boundaries. His hands, his mouth, the way he whispered my name, it all felt like a rebellion against Zachary's ultimatum, against the constraints of marriage itself. I justified it to myself. It wasn't really cheating if we didn't go all the way, a stupid, convenient loophole I created on the spot. In the back of my mind, I knew it was wrong, knew that technicalities wouldn't matter to Zachary. But in that moment, I didn't care. Afterward, lying in Austin's bed with his arm around me, I felt a strange mix of emotions, guilt, defiance, confusion, and underneath it all, a petty desire to hurt Zachary like he'd hurt me with his ultimatum. I should go back to my room, I said eventually, untangling myself from Austin. Stay, he murmured, half asleep. The others will talk, he chuckled. Let them, you're a free woman, remember? But I wasn't, not really. And some part of me knew that what freedom I did have, I was using to destroy something valuable. I slipped back to my room around 2 a.m., showered, and then did something I knew would cross the final line. I opened Instagram, found the bikini photo of Austin and me from earlier that day and posted it. Making memories with the people who truly matter. Beach vibes and best friends. I captioned it, tagging Austin. I stared at the post for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the share button. Some tiny voice in my head was screaming that this was a mistake, that I was about to pour gasoline on an already dangerous fire. But a louder voice, fueled by wine and righteous indignation, drowned it out. I pressed post, then immediately turned my phone off, not wanting to see Zachary's reaction. Part of me knew I'd crossed a line, but a bigger part felt vindicated. He wanted to control me? Well, here was my response. I fell asleep with a knot in my stomach that not even my righteous anger could fully untie. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a sense of dread. When I finally worked up the courage to turn my phone back on, it exploded with notifications, comments on the photo, messages from mutual friends, but nothing from Zachary. The silence was worse than anger. Austin acted like nothing had happened, greeting me with a casual morning sunshine at breakfast. But there was a new smugness in his smile that made me uncomfortable. Tiffany watched us with narrowed eyes, and Katie seemed to be deliberately avoiding me. The last day of the trip passed in a blur of awkward moments and forced fun. I kept checking my phone, expecting Zachary to finally break his silence, but nothing came. The drive home loomed ahead of me, feeling a million miles long. Before I left, Tiffany pulled me aside. "I hope that post was worth it," she said, her voice uncharacteristically serious. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You know exactly what it means, Paisley. Everyone saw that photo. Everyone knows what it was meant to say." "It wasn't meant to say anything," I protested weakly. "It's just a beach photo." Tiffany just shook her head. "Call me when you get home safe." Austin's goodbye was different, a hug that lasted too long. A whispered, "Let me know how it goes," that felt more like anticipation than concern. As I drove away, watching him wave from the porch, I had the sinking feeling that whatever had happened between us wasn't the beginning of something new, but the end of something important. The drive home felt endless. I rehearsed explanations, justifications, and apologies, trying to find the right combination of words that would fix what I'd broken. But as the miles passed, I realized that some things can't be fixed with words alone. When I finally pulled into our driveway, I knew something was wrong. Zachary's car was there, but the house felt different, empty somehow, despite his presence. I walked in calling his name, but no answer came. Then I saw it. His closet half empty. Dresser drawers pulled open with just my stuff left behind. My heart pounded as I ran room to room, searching for him, for some explanation. In the kitchen, I found his note. "Staying at Jake's, we need to talk, but not tonight." I called him immediately, but he sent me to voicemail. I texted, "Are you serious right now? You're moving out because of a photo?" Then I sat on our kitchen floor and cried until I couldn't breathe. He finally came over the next day. I'd barely slept, rehearsing all my arguments, preparing my defense. But the man who walked in wasn't the Zachary I expected. He was calm, cold, a stranger wearing my husband's face. "So you're back," he said, voice flat. "How was your trip with Austin?" "Don't do that," I snapped. "Don't act like I committed some major crime. You're the one who gave me an ultimatum." He pulled out his phone and showed me my photo. "This isn't just a beach picture, Paisley. This is you deliberately trying to hurt me, to humiliate me." Then he scrolled to the comments, friends asking where he was, Austin responding with a winking emoji, people I barely knew weighing in on our marriage. "You made our marriage problems public," he said. "You wanted everyone to see you defying me." "You went through my phone," I countered. "You tried to control who I could see and where I could go. I asked you not to go on one trip with a guy who clearly wants more than friendship after finding messages that made me uncomfortable. That's it." He rubbed his eyes like he was tired. "But this isn't even about Austin." "Then what is it about?" I demanded. "It's about respect, Paisley. It's about you always needing to test how much I'll take. The innocent flirting with other guys when we're out, the way you shut me out of your friend group, how you're always the victim when we fight." He looked at me with such disappointment, it hurt more than anger would have. I saw the beach photo, and I know what happened with Austin. My blood ran cold. "Nothing happened," I lied automatically. "Don't." He held up a hand. "Katie saw you coming out of his room at 2 a.m. She texted me because she was worried." I felt cornered. "We didn't have sex," I insisted. "That's not cheating." Zachary just stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief. "Do you actually believe that anything short of intercourse is acceptable with another man?" "It's not like I planned it," I said defensively. "And maybe if you hadn't been so controlling, I wouldn't have." "Stop." His voice was quiet but firm. "No more making this my fault. I'm staying at Jake's for now. I need space to think." "You're overreacting," I said, panic rising. "This wasn't how this was supposed to go." "I came back, didn't I? I'm here." Physically, maybe, he stood up to leave, but you haven't been present in this marriage for a long time, Paisley. And neither have I, that's on both of us. When he walked out, I had this terrible feeling that I'd miscalculated everything. That what I thought was a game of chicken, who would back down first, was actually the end of something I wasn't ready to lose. After Zachary left, the fallout hit like a tsunami. I made the mistake of checking Facebook, where that stupid bikini picture had become a whole thing. Mutual friends were commenting with little supportive messages to Zachary. Even my cousin Amber, who I thought was firmly on Team Paisley, wrote sending you strength Z with a heart emoji. Like I was the villain in this story. I tried calling Zachary again, but still straight to voicemail. I texted him 3 times with no response. At first, I was angry all over again. How dare he just walk away? How dare he make me the bad guy when he was the one who started this with his ridiculous ultimatum? But as night fell and I found myself alone in our house for the second night in a row, the anger began to give way to something more uncomfortable. Doubt. Had I really messed up as badly as everyone seemed to think? Was posting that photo really such a big deal? I called my mom in tears. She'd always been my biggest supporter, the one who understood my independent streak because she had one too. I gave her my version, Zachary's controlling behavior, the ultimatum, how I just wanted a weekend with friends. Oh, honey, she said, her voice softening with sympathy. That does sound overwhelming. Has Zachary ever been controlling before? Not exactly, I admitted. But he's been weird about Austin for months. Well, men can be territorial, she said. Especially about male friends. Maybe he was just feeling insecure. He had no reason to be, I insisted, conveniently leaving out what had happened with Austin. Mom promised to talk to him. He's always been so reasonable, she said. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. Her support made me feel better, vindicated even. If my own mother could see my side, surely I couldn't be completely wrong. She'd always been a good judge of character, but 3 days later, after she'd spoken to Zachary, her tone completely changed. You did what with Austin? She demanded when I picked up her call. My stomach dropped. Mom, it's not what you think. Paisa Leanne, I raised you better than that, she said, using my full name like she had when I was a child in serious trouble. We didn't have sex, I said, falling back on my technicality. It wasn't cheating. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Mom, Paisley, her voice was different now, disappointed in a way that cut deep. That's not how marriage works. That's not how respect works. You're taking his side? I asked, incredulous. This isn't about sides, sweetheart. This is about vows, about promises you made, about treating someone you claim to love with basic decency. When I tried to explain my technical loophole about not actually having sex, she practically hung up on me. Call me when you're ready to grow up, were her parting words. Even my own mother was judging me. Then came the awkward run-in with Austin's girlfriend, Megan. I hadn't seen her since the trip. She couldn't come because of work. I was at the grocery store when she approached my cart, ice in her eyes but a smile plastered on her face. Hey Paisley, she said. How was the beach? Austin told me you all had quite the weekend. My stomach dropped. It was fun, I managed. Same as always. She studied me. You know, Austin told me everything about your little after-hours activities. She leaned in closer. And just so you know, he laughed about it later. Said you seemed to think it meant something, that it was just Paisley being Paisley. I felt like I'd been slapped. He's my friend, I said weakly. No, honey, he's my boyfriend who you've been inappropriate with, and you're a married woman who should know better. She pushed her cart past me. Or I guess we're a married woman. I hear Zachary's filing papers. Filing papers, my heart raced. She had to be lying to hurt me. But when I got home, I checked Zachary's browser history on our shared laptop. There it was, a consultation with a divorce attorney scheduled for the next day. This was really happening. Zachary was actually considering divorce over one stupid trip, one stupid photo, one stupid mistake with Austin that wasn't even technically cheating. Wasn't it the worst came when my friend Tiffany finally told me what everyone was saying behind my back. We met for coffee, and I could tell she was uncomfortable from the moment she sat down. She kept fidgeting with her cup, avoiding my eyes. Just spit it out, I said, she sighed. Look, what you did on the trip wasn't cool, and not just the Austin thing. The photo was deliberately hurtful. Zachary tried to control me, I insisted. Did he, though? She looked skeptical. Because from where everyone else stands, he set a boundary in your marriage that you bulldozed over, and then you humiliated him publicly. It was just a beach photo, I protested. With a guy you used to date, which, by the way, I can't believe you never told Zachary about, with his hand on your waist and a caption about people who truly matter right after your husband asked you not to go. She shook her head. It looked calculated, Paisley. I sat there speechless for once. And then there's the Austin thing, she continued. Katie told everyone what she saw, and now Austin's telling guys at the bar that it wasn't even the first time. He's lying, I said, blood running cold. That never happened before. Tiffany just gave me a look. Maybe, but here's the thing, people believe him because of how you've acted. All the flirty comments, the inside jokes, the way you prioritize him. He's my best friend, I said weakly. No, Tiffany said firmly. I'm your best friend, and as your best friend, I need to tell you that you messed up big time, and I don't know if you can fix it. As I drove home, I realized something I'd been avoiding. People weren't just taking Zachary's side because they liked him better. They were taking his side because in this scenario, I was actually the one who'd done wrong, and that was a hard pill to swallow. The next few days were a blur of unanswered calls and texts to Zachary. I tried everything: angry messages demanding explanations, tearful voicemails begging for another chance, casual texts acting like nothing was wrong. Nothing worked. The silence was deafening. I kept checking our bank accounts, waiting for some sign that he was withdrawing money, making big changes. But there was nothing unusual, just his regular paycheck going in, regular bills going out. It was almost worse this way, the normal mechanics of our shared life continuing while the emotional foundation crumbled. After a week of silence, I decided I needed to fix this mess. I wasn't ready to admit I was completely wrong. Hello, the ultimatum was still controlling, but I could see I'd taken things too far. So I texted Zachary asking to meet for dinner. To my surprise, he agreed. I spent hours getting ready, choosing an outfit I knew he loved, the one I wore on our first anniversary. I made reservations at the Italian place where we had our rehearsal dinner. I was going to remind him of what we had, of our history. I practiced my apology in the mirror. Not too submissive, but just sorry enough. I made a mistake. I was hurt and angry about the ultimatum. The photo was thoughtless, and what happened with Austin was a mistake that will never happen again. Our marriage means everything to me. When he walked in, my heart skipped. He looked good but tired. The kind of tired that comes from sleepless nights and heavy decisions. He sat down without kissing me hello, and I knew this wouldn't be easy. I'm glad you wanted to talk, I started, reaching for his hand across the table. I've missed you, he nodded but said nothing. His hand remained limp in mine, not returning the pressure. I want to apologize, I continued, trying to stay on script. Things got out of hand at the beach. The photo was thoughtless. And what happened with Austin? He asked directly. I faltered. This wasn't how the conversation was supposed to go. That was a mistake. I'd been drinking and I was upset about our fight. Didn't mean anything. So you admit it happened? His voice was steady, but I could see the hurt in his eyes. Yes, but it wasn't. We didn't actually. I stumbled over my words. It wasn't full-on cheating. He pulled his hand away. Paisley, if I did exactly what you did with a female friend, would you consider it cheating? The question caught me off guard. I wanted to say no to be consistent, but we both knew I'd be furious if the roles were reversed. I'd consider it a complete betrayal. I dodged instead. This isn't about hypotheticals. This is about us, our marriage. The marriage you were willing to risk over a beach trip, he asked. Or the one you humiliated publicly. You're the one who gave me an ultimatum, I shot back, my plan for calm reconciliation already derailing. You backed me into a corner. I asked you not to go on one trip because I was uncomfortable with your relationship with Austin. One trip, he sighed. And instead of considering why I might feel that way, you turned it into this huge power struggle. Because you were trying to control me. Was I? He looked genuinely confused. Or was I asking for respect, for my feelings to matter as much as Austin's? That hit a nerve because deep down I knew there was some truth to it. I'd always prioritized Austin's feelings, his needs, his place in my life. I just want us to move forward, I said, softening my tone. I placed my hand on his thigh under the table, sliding it upward suggestively. I miss you, I miss us. He removed my hand firmly. Sex isn't going to fix this, Paisley. It never has, even though you've tried to use it that way before. I felt exposed, like he could see through all my strategies. Then what do you want from me? Accountability, he said simply. Real understanding of why what you did was harmful, not just for the trip, but for the pattern of disrespect. I tried to hold back tears. I said I was sorry. For getting caught, he replied, not for the actions themselves. The dinner went downhill from there. I alternated between defensive arguments and tearful pleas. At one point, out of desperation, I said, if you leave me over this, I don't know what I'll do to myself. It was a tactic I'd used before when backed into a corner, hinting at self-harm to make him back down. This time, he didn't take the bait. Don't do that, he said firmly. That's emotional manipulation, and we both know it. He placed money on the table for the bill. I've been talking to a therapist. She's helping me see patterns I've been enabling. So some stranger is telling you to divorce me? I asked bitterly. No, he said, standing up. She's helping me see that I deserve a relationship based on mutual respect. He paused. I filed the separation papers yesterday, Paisley. My lawyer will be in touch. I sat in that restaurant long after he left, wondering how it had come to this. How one weekend, one fode, one mistake could end 4 years of marriage. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just one weekend. It was 100 small choices where I'd put my wants above our marriage. 100 moments where I'd chosen Austin's friendship over Zachary's comfort. 100 times I'd tested boundaries just to prove I could. I spent the next week alternating between rage and despair. One minute I was furious at Zachary for throwing away our marriage. The next I was a puddle of tears, unable to believe this was really happening. I kept expecting him to call to say he'd reconsidered, that we could work through this. But the only call that came was from his lawyer, a polite woman named Elaine who wanted to discuss the division of assets. I wanted to scream. Assets? We were talking about coffee makers and bath towels now. What about the life we'd built? What about the future we'd planned? I didn't tell my friends or family about the separation papers. I couldn't bear to see the "I told you so" in their eyes, couldn't stand another round of judgment. Instead, I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, volunteering for projects I normally would have avoided. My boss noticed the change. Everything okay, Paisley? You've been putting in a lot of extra hours lately. Just focused on my career, I said with a fake brightness that fooled no one. At night, alone in our house, I'd wander from room to room, looking at the life we'd built together. The kitchen where we'd cooked Sunday breakfasts. The living room where we'd binge-watched shows, my feet in his lap. The bedroom where we'd whispered dreams in the dark. Had I really thrown all of this away for one act of defiance? For the fleeting satisfaction of proving I couldn't be controlled? After 2 weeks of this limbo, I finally broke down and called Austin. I hadn't spoken to him since the trip, partly out of guilt, partly because I blamed him for his role in the mess. But mostly because I was afraid of what Megan had said that to him. It had just been Paisley being Paisley. Hey stranger, he answered, sounding carefree. How's life treating you? Not great, I admitted. Zachary filed for separation. His loss, Austin said too quickly. That guy never appreciated what he had anyway. What's that supposed to mean? Come on, Paisley. He tried to control you. He gave you an ultimatum about seeing your friends. You're better off without someone like that. I found myself getting angry. You told Megan what happened between us. There was a pause. Well, yeah, we don't keep secrets. She was cool with it. Cool with it, she confronted me in the grocery store, Austin. And apparently you're telling people it wasn't the first time. Whoa, I never said that, he protested, but there was something off in his voice. You know what, never mind, I said. This was a mistake. Look, if you need a place to crash or someone to talk to, I'm here for you, he said. That's what friends are for, right? Friends. The word suddenly felt hollow coming from him. Was this what friendship looked like? Engaging in behavior that could destroy my marriage and then acting like it was no big deal. I have to go, I said and hung up before he could respond. That night, I did something I'd been avoiding. I looked at our wedding photos. There we were, younger and stupidly optimistic, promising forever to each other. Zachary looking at me like I was the answer to every question he'd ever had. Me radiant in white, committing to a man I really did love. What had happened to that couple? When had we started taking each other for granted? When had I started seeing his concerns as control rather than care? As I flipped through the album, I came across a photo of us with Austin. He was Zachary's groomsman, something I'd insisted on because he was such an important part of my life. Looking at it now, I saw something I'd missed then, the slightly proprietary way Austin's hand rested on my arm, the hint of challenge in his eyes as he stood next to my new husband. Had it always been there, this undercurrent? Had I been willfully blind to it because I enjoyed the attention, the feeling of being wanted by two men? The truth, when it finally hit me, was uncomfortable. I hadn't gone on that trip just to assert my independence. I hadn't posted that photo just to make a point about control. Some part of me had wanted to hurt Zachary, to punish him for daring to question the sacredness of my friendship with Austin. And Austin hadn't been the innocent best friend I'd portrayed him as. He'd been waiting for a crack in my marriage, a chance to step in and play the hero who understood me in ways my controlling husband didn't. I'd been so busy defending my right to have male friends that I'd ignored the fact that this particular male friend had his own agenda, one that had nothing to do with respecting my marriage. The realization made me sick to my stomach. How had I been so blind? How had I fallen for such an obvious play? More importantly, how had I justified betraying someone who genuinely loved me? For the first time since this whole mess began, I cried not for myself, but for Zachary. For the pain I'd caused him, the humiliation, the betrayal. He hadn't deserved any of it. And with that admission came another, harder truth. Maybe I wasn't the victim in this story after all. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. After my realization about Austin and my own role in destroying my marriage, I needed to talk to Zachary again. Not to manipulate him into coming back, not to play the victim, but to truly apologize for what I'd done. I texted him, "Can we please talk? I need to say some things I should have said weeks ago." To my surprise, he responded within minutes. "I have time tomorrow evening. One more chance." That's what this felt like. Not to save our marriage necessarily, but to at least end things with honesty and dignity instead of bitterness and manipulation. I spent the day thinking about what I would say, how I would explain my actions without making excuses. It was harder than I expected. I'd gotten so used to justifying everything, to finding technicalities and loopholes, that facing my behavior head-on felt almost foreign. The next evening, Zachary agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown that neither of us frequented regularly. I arrived early, my stomach in knots. When he walked in, looking composed and distant, I realized how much I missed him. Not just the comfort of having a partner, but him specifically, his quiet laugh, the way he could calm me down with just a look, how he always remembered the small details about my day. "Thank you for coming," I said as he sat down across from me. He nodded but didn't smile. "What did you want to talk about?" I'd rehearsed what I was going to say, but now, faced with his guarded expression, all my careful words evaporated. Instead, I went with the raw truth. "I want to apologize." Really apologize, not like before. I took a deep breath. What I did was wrong, not just at the beach with Austin, but the way I've been treating our marriage, treating you. I've been selfish and disrespectful, and I hurt you deliberately. There's no excuse for that. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe. He clearly hadn't expected this level of accountability. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about patterns of disrespect," I continued. "And you were right. I've prioritized other relationships over ours. I've tested boundaries just because I could. I've treated your concerns as attempts to control me instead of seeing them for what they were, reasonable requests from someone I promised to respect." "Why?" he asked simply. "Why Austin? Why that trip? Why the photo?" The question hit me hard. Why indeed? I've been asking myself the same thing. Honestly, I think I wanted to prove that I could, that no one could tell me what to do, even my husband. It sounded so petty when I said it out loud. And with Austin specifically, I knew it would hurt you, which is terrible but true. He made me feel like my independence was this sacred thing that you were trying to destroy, when really, he just wanted to drive a wedge between us. Zachary nodded slowly. I suspected as much about Austin. That's why I was uncomfortable with the trip. I should have listened to you. I should have at least tried to understand where you were coming from instead of immediately assuming you were being controlling. I hesitated. And I should have told you about dating Austin in college. Keeping that from you was dishonest, and it created this secret between us that shouldn't have existed. Yes, it did, he agreed. Finding that out from Katie, of all people, felt like a betrayal on top of everything else. I winced. I'm sorry for all of it. For the trip, for what happened with Austin, for the photo I posted to hurt you, for trying to minimize it all afterward. You deserved better. He was quiet for a long moment, studying me. This is different, you're different today. I had a reality check. Several, actually. Everyone from my mom to Tiffany has been trying to make me see what I did wrong, but I wasn't ready to hear it. I gave a sad laugh. I even tried calling Austin, thinking he'd be sympathetic, only to realize he was never really my friend. Not in the way I thought. What do you mean? Let's just say his version of events makes me look like a repeat offender and him like an innocent bystander. Megan confronted me at the grocery store, told me he laughed about what happened, said it was just Paisley being Paisley. Zachary's expression hardened. That sounds like Austin. I was so busy defending my right to have this friendship that I couldn't see what it actually was, or what I was doing to our marriage by prioritizing it. We fell into silence, both processing. Around us, the coffee shop hummed with normal life, people on dates, friends catching up, students studying. It felt surreal that in the midst of this ordinary scene, we were dismantling 4 years of marriage. So what now? I finally asked. Zachary sighed. I don't know, Paisley. This is the first real conversation we've had about all this where you haven't tried to manipulate the situation, and I appreciate that. But there's a lot of damage done. I know, I said quietly. I'm not asking you to come back. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did and that I'm truly sorry for it. He nodded. Thank you for that. I need some time to think. As we parted ways outside the coffee shop, there was an awkward moment where neither of us knew the protocol. Do ex-spouses hug goodbye? Shake hands? In the end, he gave me a brief nod and walked away. I watched him go, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for what we'd lost, relief that I'd finally been honest with him and with myself. The following days were a strange limbo. The lawyer's office called to schedule a meeting about the division of assets, but Zachary texted asking to postpone it. I need some time to consider things, he wrote. I didn't know what that meant, but I tried not to let hope take root too firmly. Instead, I focused on processing everything that had happened and trying to understand my own behavior better. I started writing in a journal, recording thoughts and realizations as they came to me. Why had I been so quick to see Zachary's boundaries as control? Why had Austin's opinion mattered more to me than my husband's? Why had I felt the need to test limits and push boundaries? Some of the answers were uncomfortable. I had commitment issues that dated back to my parents' messy divorce. I equated independence with never having to consider another person's feelings. I confused being controlled with being asked to respect reasonable boundaries. And perhaps most uncomfortably, I realized I enjoyed the attention from Austin, enjoyed knowing I could still affect him that way, enjoyed the power it gave me. It was a selfish, immature part of myself I'd never fully acknowledged. One evening, scrolling mindlessly through social media, I came across a photo of Austin and Megan at a party. They looked happy, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders. The caption read, 4 years with this one, anniversary. Something about it bothered me, and it took me a minute to realize why. 4 years. The same amount of time Zachary and I had been married. Which meant Austin had been dating Megan when he and I went to Austin's room at the beach house. When he suggested we discuss what might have been. When he told me Zachary was trying to control me. He'd been in a committed relationship the entire time, just like I had been. Yet he'd acted like my marriage was the only one being compromised. I felt sick. I'd ruined my marriage for someone who was playing games with both me and his girlfriend. For someone who had never really respected me or my relationship, on an impulse, I texted Megan, "I think we should talk." We met at a park the next day. She looked wary as she approached the bench where I was waiting. "Thanks for meeting me," I said. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see right now." "Actually, I've been wanting to talk to you too," she said, sitting down. "Some things aren't adding up." "Like what?" "Like Austin's version of what happened at the beach. At first, he made it sound like you came onto him, that he stopped it because he remembered he had a girlfriend. But then I heard from Katie that he was all over you the whole weekend." I nodded. "He was, and I let him be. I'm not making excuses for my part in it." I took a deep breath. "But he definitely initiated what happened in his room, and he knew exactly what he was doing, pushing all my buttons about Zachary being controlling." Megan's face fell. "So he lied to me again." "Again?" She gave a bitter laugh. "This isn't the first time. There was another girl last year, his coworker. He swore it was just a misunderstanding, that she was obsessed with him. I believed him because I wanted to." We sat in silence for a moment, two women who had been manipulated by the same man in different ways. "I'm sorry about what I said at the grocery store," she finally offered. "I was angry." "Don't be sorry, I deserved it. What I did was wrong, regardless of Austin's role in it." "We're both idiots," she said with a sad smile. "Complete idiots," I agreed. By the time we parted ways, something had shifted. Not friendship exactly, but a mutual understanding. We'd both been played, both made bad choices, both suffered consequences. The conversation with Megan reinforced what I already knew, that I needed to take full responsibility for my actions regardless of Austin's games. But it also put the final nail in the coffin of my friendship with him. I went home and blocked his number, removed him from all social media, deleted our text history. It felt like closing a chapter that should have ended years ago. 2 days later, Zachary texted asking if we could talk again. We met at our house, his suggestion, which surprised me. He looked better than the last time I'd seen him. Less tired, less guarded. "I've been thinking about our conversation," he said once we were seated at the kitchen table. "About your apology." I nodded, trying not to appear too eager or defensive. "I spoke with my therapist about it, about us. She asked me a question that I've been reflecting on." He paused. "She asked if I thought people could change patterns that were deeply ingrained, if I believed you could change the dynamics that led to what happened." "And what did you say?" I asked quietly. "I said I didn't know, that 4 years of marriage should count for something, but so should the breach of trust." He met my eyes directly. "What do you think? Can people change those kinds of patterns?" It was a genuine question, not a trap. I could feel the weight of it. "I think they can," I said slowly. "But not without real awareness and hard work, not without being willing to be uncomfortable and face things about themselves they'd rather ignore." I took a deep breath. "I've started seeing a therapist too. I've only had 2 sessions, but already I'm recognizing things about myself that weren't healthy. Ways I've been sabotaging relationships, not just ours." His eyebrows rose slightly. "That's good, that you're working on yourself, I mean." "It is good, painful but good." I hesitated. "For what it's worth, I talked to Megan, Austin's girlfriend. Turns out he's been lying to both of us. I've cut him out completely." "I heard Katie mention seeing you two at the park." "Of course she did. Our social circle was too small for secrets." "It was clarifying," I said. "But it doesn't change what I did. I still made those choices, regardless of his role in it." Zachary nodded, and I saw something like respect in his expression. Maybe the first positive emotion I'd seen from him since this whole mess began. "I've been thinking," he said after a moment. "Maybe we should consider counseling before finalizing the divorce. Not promising anything, but at least to process what happened in a healthier way." It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't even close. But it was a tiny opening, a small acknowledgement that perhaps our story wasn't entirely finished. "I'd like that," I said simply. As Zachary left that day, there was another awkward moment at the door. This time he briefly squeezed my shoulder before walking out. It was a small gesture, but it felt like the first tentative step on a very long road. That night I sat on our porch swing, thinking about everything that had happened. About how one beach trip, one ultimatum, one photo had unraveled years of marriage. Or rather, how they had exposed fault lines that had been there all along. I thought about the woman I had been just weeks ago, defensive, self-righteous, unwilling to see how my actions affected others. She felt simultaneously like a stranger and like my most authentic self. The self I'd have to acknowledge and understand if I ever wanted to be better. I didn't know if Zachary and I would find our way back to each other. Some betrayals cut too deep to fully heal. But I did know that whatever happened, I needed to be different going forward. More honest, more accountable, more willing to respect boundaries. As the sun set over our neighborhood, I felt a strange peace settle over me. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, not by a long shot, but because for perhaps the first time in my adult life, I was seeing myself clearly. Really seeing the patterns, the defenses, the ways I'd been my own worst enemy. It was a beginning. A painful one, but a beginning nonetheless. 3 months passed. Zachary and I had been attending couples counseling weekly, and I continued with my individual therapy twice a month. The process was harder than I expected, peeling back layers of defensiveness and really examining my behavior patterns wasn't exactly comfortable. But it was necessary. We were still living separately. Zachary had rented a small apartment across town, and I remained in our house. The separation papers were on hold while we worked through counseling, but the divorce still loomed as a very real possibility, Dr. Winters, our couples therapist, had helped us establish some ground rules for our sessions. No interrupting. No bringing up past hurts as weapons. Focus on feelings rather than accusations. It sounded simple, but in practice, it was incredibly difficult. Paisley, she said during one particularly tough session, can you explain to Zachary how you felt when he asked you not to go on the beach trip without bringing up what happened afterward? I took a deep breath. I felt like my independence was being threatened. Like suddenly after 4 years of marriage, you didn't trust me. It scared me, and when I get scared, I get defensive. And Zachary, how did you feel when Paisley insisted on going despite your concerns? He looked directly at me, something that had been rare in our early sessions. I felt dismissed, like my feelings didn't matter compared to your friendship with Austin. It confirmed a fear I'd had for a while, that I would always come second. Those sessions were exhausting but clarifying. We were learning to listen to each other in ways we never had before, to recognize triggers and patterns that had been sabotaging our relationship long before the beach trip. It was during one of my individual therapy sessions that I had a breakthrough about my relationship with Austin. He represented freedom to me, I explained to my therapist, Dr. Chen. The me that existed before marriage, before responsibility. Going to him whenever I was upset with Zachary was like stepping back in time to when things were simpler. And did that serve your marriage? Dr. Chen asked quietly. No, I admitted. It undermined it. Every time I ran to Austin with my problems instead of working them out with Zachary, I was choosing the easy comfort of the past over the harder work of the present. These realizations were painful but freeing. For the first time, I was seeing the role I had played in the breakdown of my marriage, not just the beach trip betrayal, but all the small choices that had led to that point. Austin had tried to contact me several times after I blocked him. He showed up at my office once, claiming he needed to explain, but I asked security to escort him out. According to mutual friends, he and Megan had broken up after our conversation in the park. I felt a pang of guilt about that, but not enough to let him back into my life. My friendship circle had shifted too. Tiffany and I had grown closer, her honesty during the fallout from the beach trip cementing her role as a true friend rather than just a fun companion. Katie and I were still awkward around each other, but slowly rebuilding trust. Other friendships had faded naturally as I focused on healing and self-improvement. After 3 months of steady progress in therapy, Zachary suggested we try a real date. Not just a counseling session followed by polite small talk, but an actual evening out. No pressure, he said. Just dinner, to see where we're at outside the therapist's office. I agreed, trying not to read too much into it. We'd had good days and terrible days in counseling. Moments of connection followed by setbacks when old hurts resurfaced. I didn't want to pin too much hope on one dinner, I spent hours getting ready, trying to find the right balance. I wanted to look nice, but not like I was trying too hard. To be myself, but the best version of myself. In the end, I settled on a simple dress in Zachary's favorite color and minimal makeup. New but familiar like us. We met at a restaurant we'd never been to before, neutral territory. When I walked in and saw him waiting at the table, my heart did that familiar skip. Despite everything, there was still something between us, some pull that therapy and time apart hadn't erased. "You look nice," he said as I sat down. "Thank you, so do you." The early conversation was stilted, with both of us defaulting to safe topics. Work, the weather, a movie he'd seen recently. But as the meal progressed, something shifted. The familiar rhythm of our conversation returned, like muscle memory asserting itself. He told me about a project at work that was challenging him. I shared a story about my mom's latest gardening obsession. We laughed about a memory from our second year of marriage, when we tried to build a bookshelf together and ended up with something that leaned so dramatically it was practically a slide. It felt good. Normal. Like we were finding our way back to each other. But then, over dessert, he brought up the topic we'd been dancing around all evening. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about whether we have a future together." My heart pounded. And I'm still not sure. His honesty was both painful and refreshing. There are days when I think we're making real progress, that we're building something stronger than what we had before. And then there are days when I remember that photo, or what happened with Austin, and I wonder if I'll ever fully trust you again. I nodded, fighting back tears. "I understand that, I do. What about you?" he asked. "Do you still want this marriage?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "But not the marriage we had before, not with the patterns and problems we were ignoring. I want something healthier, something built on real respect and communication." He reached across the table and took my hand, the first time he'd initiated physical contact in months. "That's what I want too. I'm just not sure if we can get there from here." We left the restaurant with nothing resolved but something important acknowledged. That whatever happened, we both wanted the best for each other. That beyond the hurt and betrayal, there was still care. A week after our dinner, Zachary asked if we could meet at our house. I spent the morning cleaning, not because the house was particularly messy, but because I needed something to do with my nervous energy. When he arrived, he was carrying a small box, which he set on the coffee table as he sat down. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since our dinner," he began. "About us, about what happened, about where we go from here." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "I talked to my therapist about something that's been bothering me. About whether the beach trip and what happened with Austin was a symptom or the disease itself." "What do you mean?" "I mean, was it a one-time massive mistake that we could move past, or was it an indication of fundamental problems that would always be there?" I'd been asking myself the same question. "And what did you conclude?" "That it was both." He opened the box and pulled out our wedding album, the same one I'd looked through during my moment of clarity months ago. I was looking through this and remembering the promises we made, not just the vows but all the conversations we had about what our marriage would be. He flipped to a photo of us at the altar, faces solemn as we repeated those promises. We didn't keep those promises, either of us. "Your betrayal was more dramatic, but I checked out of this marriage long before that beach trip. I stopped listening. I stopped trying to understand. I just expected you to figure out what I needed without me having to say it." It was the most he'd ever acknowledged his own role in our problems, and it took my breath away. "I made ultimatums instead of having conversations," he continued. "I got jealous without explaining why. I let resentment build up instead of addressing issues as they arose." "We both did," I said softly. He nodded. "Which brings me to why I wanted to talk today." He took a deep breath. "I want to try again, really try, not just counseling but living together, being married again in practice, not just on paper." My heart soared, but I tried to stay grounded. "Are you sure? Last week you still seemed uncertain." "I'm not saying it will be easy," he clarified, "or that I'm completely over what happened. But I think what we're building in therapy has potential. I think we're both changing in ways that could make a real difference." "I'd like that," I said, tears welling up. "I'd like to try again." He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "There's one condition though." "What's that?" Complete honesty from now on, even when it's hard, even when it might hurt. We tell each other what we're feeling before it becomes resentment or leads to acting out. I can do that, I promised. I want to do that. He moved from the armchair to sit beside me on the couch. There's something I need to be honest about right now then. My stomach tightened, bracing for whatever difficult truth he needed to share. I've missed you. He reached for my hand. Not just the idea of being married or having a partner, you specifically. The way you laugh at your own jokes, how excited you get about new books, even the way you can never remember where you put your keys. I laughed through tears. I've missed you too, so much. He pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe we would be okay. Not perfect, not back to where we were before, but something new and potentially stronger. Zachary moved back in the following weekend. We were careful with each other at first, almost formal in our politeness. But gradually we found a new rhythm. Date nights became a regular thing. We established check-ins where we could raise concerns before they festered. We practiced the communication skills we'd been learning in therapy. There were still hard moments. The first time Austin's name came up in conversation with friends, I could feel Zachary tense beside me. When Megan started dating someone new and posted about it online, I worried about whether Austin would try to contact me again. These weren't moments that would ever disappear completely, but they became less frequent, less powerful. 6 months after Zachary moved back in, we renewed our vows in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family present. Not because we needed a fresh start, but because we wanted to acknowledge that the promises we were making now were different, more informed, more realistic, more deeply understood. In my vows, I promised to honor boundaries, to communicate honestly, to recognize that independence within marriage meant making choices that respected both of us, not just me. Zachary promised to share his feelings directly, to not let fear turn into control, to trust the woman I was becoming rather than fearing the woman I had been. After the ceremony, my mom hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "Not for saving your marriage, but for doing the work to deserve it." That night, as Zachary and I lay in bed talking about the day, he brought up something unexpected. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't gone on that beach trip?" I considered the question carefully. Honestly, I think we would have continued as we were. The same patterns, the same disconnection, just without the dramatic breaking point. We needed to break to rebuild. He nodded thoughtfully. "I think you're right. It's strange to be grateful for something that caused so much pain, but in a way I am." "Me too," I admitted. "Not for what I did, I'll always regret hurting you that way, but for the wake-up call, for the chance to really see myself and change." He pulled me closer. "We're not perfect, we're still going to mess up." "I know, but now we have tools to deal with it when we do, and we're both committed to trying, really trying." And that was the truth. The beach trip, the ultimatum, the photo with Austin, they had blown up my life in ways I never could have imagined. But from those ashes, something surprising had emerged. Not a perfect marriage or a perfect version of myself, but something real and honest and worth fighting for. I thought back to that moment when I had posted the photo of Austin and me, captioned with those words about the people who truly matter. I had been so wrong. The people who truly matter aren't the ones who make you feel good temporarily or who support your worst impulses. They're the ones who challenge you to be better, who stick around even when it's hard, who see all of you, the good and the bad, and choose to love you anyway. Zachary was that person for me, and through months of hard work and painful honesty, I was learning to be that person for him too. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought about what I would tell my younger self if I could go back to the day of that ultimatum. I wouldn't tell her not to go on the trip. That choice, painful as it was, had led to necessary growth. But I might whisper in her ear that independence isn't about doing whatever you want regardless of how it affects others. True independence comes from knowing who you are and making choices you can stand behind, choices that align with your values and respect the people you love. It had taken nearly destroying my marriage to understand that, but now that I did, I wasn't going to forget it. Zachary and I were building something new together, something neither of us could have created alone. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough.